Welcome to Better Odds Sports Betting. Here's our hosts, Kev O'Neill and Kyle Hunter.
What's up, football fans? Kev O'Neill back for Better Odds Sports Betting. My partner in crime, Kyle, unfortunately had to miss. It's his anniversary this weekend. He's going to the Ohio State game, so we wish him all the luck. I think if they score about 12 points against Iowa, they're probably going to be okay there. We have a great guest, though. Mr. Brady Kannon from VSiN is coming on to fill in and give us his great insights in a huge weekend of football. You can follow Brady on Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer. Brady, how you doing this fine Friday?
Hey, great to be back with you, Kiev. How are you, man?
Fantastic. Big events this weekend. I'm a big UFC fan, so we got UFC 280 coming up, and I'm super stoked for Oliveira versus Makhachev. I think it's going to be just a wonderful event. A little bit more of a quiet, not like a marquee matchup type college weekend, but we still have some good games and some good betting angles just with the sheer volume there, and obviously a big week in football. So I'm just doing fantastic. I'm just glad you're not out golfing, Brady, and you're able to join me here.
Yeah, I don't golf much during football season, man. My time is right here in the office pretty much 24/7. Unfortunately, the temperatures rise pretty high in the summertime out here in Las Vegas, but that's when I'm able to get out and golf. Nobody else is. It's like me and Matt Humans are the only two guys out there on the course in the summertime.
Yeah, I bet, man. Summer, I can do it. For some reason, I have a high cold and heat tolerance. Let's say there's a lot of people that won't do it, but even sometimes in the Phoenix and the obviously Las Vegas hot days, it even gets a little bit too much for me. But as long as it's not humid, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I was able to shed that when I left the Midwest, but we have a massive slate here of some games, and we're going to start out with some college football. What's funny? Here's what I wanted to say too before we got into the slate, Brady. You have to really appreciate what Dino Babers, Jim Harbaugh, and Chip Kelly is doing this year. Let's just turn the clocks back 3 years ago. How many people in the media and just in general were screaming for their heads to be fired? And now these programs look absolutely legit once again. Isn't that just kind of refreshing to see? Even these programs were able to kind of push away all of the noise, let's say, and keep their guys. And it's just kind of fantastic to see.
Yeah, I think refreshing is a good word. I have really enjoyed what Chip Kelly has done at UCLA, and really the Pac-12 has kind of been a pleasant surprise this year. Washington started out great. Oregon's doing what Oregon does. A lot of people had Utah picked for a possible playoff team, and they've pretty much lived up to expectations so far. USC is great, but UCLA is absolutely the surprise. And I just love seeing Kelly being able to do something there and make it exciting football in Southern California. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a local Las Vegas kid. He went to Bishop Gorman High School, so it's kind of fun watching him have all that success. And Babers, of course, is undefeated. And excuse me. And Harbaugh is a surprise to me too. Not necessarily that Michigan is good and Jim is having success and whatnot, but they were so good last year. They went all the way to the playoff. I expected them to kind of regress this year. Hasn't been the case. They're on a roll.
Right. Instead, Michigan State was the fraud there, and was the ones that regressed. And Jim Harbaugh is making a massive push already to possibly make the playoffs again, which is very difficult to do. So tons of credit goes to those guys, and tons of credit to you guys over at VSiN. Love listening to VSiN. I love all the podcasts there. 24/7 broadcast network. As soon as VSiN's inception, I think I was one of your listeners over there, Brady. So really appreciate what you guys do over there.
Well, thanks for tuning in and reading. Yeah, it's really fun. Kiev, this space that we all live in, the sports betting world, it's just fun. Obviously, it's a lot of hard work, but it's good work. Like they say, it beats digging ditches. So, VSiN is such a welcomed commodity to the sports betting space. And I think, you and I, we're not alone. I think so many people, whether you're a recreational player or a sharp better or somewhere in between, I think everybody enjoys at least little pieces of VSiN. I think no matter what show you're listening to, what article you're reading, you're always able to garner something.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always getting something from it. And sometimes it's just best to listen, just to get confirmation bias for yourself, or possibly you might miss something. I mean, we're all human. We can't see every single element. We're not always going to get every single piece of information. And VSiN is that one place that has all those perspectives, being that they're on all the time, just a plethora of information. So us in the sports betting, I guess, industry, or just in the whole public itself, thank you guys so much for what you do. Let's get into the first game for college football here. And I'm going to pick this one because I found it very interesting. Boise State versus Air Force. Air Force +1. The total is 47.5. And I'll start on this one. This thing went way down, Brady. I mean, this thing was like at 4.5, 5.5. And maybe if that would have stuck above the 3, I was ready to have a play. When we were talking this week, when we picked this game, that's exactly where it was. But I also have another play on it that I want to discuss here. This line, like I said, tanks down. Boise State got rid of their offensive coordinator and quarterback Hank Bachmeier. And then that first half against Fresno, they looked terrible, or San Diego State. And then all of a sudden they sparked, but it was mostly the run game, but they sparked. The quarterback's throwing well. And then they beat a quarterback-less, let's say, Fresno State by 20 points at home. Now, that's fantastic. And I think it's good for the program that they made that bounce back after 2 massive changes in their coordinator and their coach. But they're on the road here. This is the first time they had that challenge on the road. Now, obviously, when they lost that ugly game to, I think it was UTEP or somebody like that, like outright, or it was either that or New Mexico, it really affected their minds, I thought, and that's why they made that change. But they're still on the road, first time on the road, proving themselves. What I like about Boise State's what they do against the run, because Air Force is an option team. They rank 17th in rushing success rate. 2.92 yards per rush is what they allow. That could hurt this Air Force team, but I don't know what to expect from the offense of Boise State. And I know Air Force has been a very solid team. I like the under, and I have a slightly better number than this, but I took it at 48.5. I still like it all the way down to 44 personally. Air Force is the slowest tempo in all of college football, 32 seconds per play. Boise State on the road usually does not put up a lot of points. The under is 6-1 in Boise's last 7 road games. I still like it at under 47.5 for a few stars. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think just on the surface, you would be looking towards the under, before you dive into some of those stats that you've mentioned and some of the trends for Boise on the road and what have you. Just look at these 2 teams. They're rushing teams. We, of course, know that about the academies, and certainly Air Force fits that bill. And now Boise State is also under Dirk Cutter. You mentioned the new offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter. I mean, that's a pretty good upgrade right there at offensive coordinator for the Broncos. And he's been having great success on the ground. One of the best rushing teams in the country. I think maybe number 1. Maybe Air Force is number 1, but Boise is right there. So you have 2 of the top rushing teams in the country in college football, and that just speaks under right there, right? When we run the ball all the time and we're not passing, and for those that are maybe new to this, philosophy. When you pass the ball, you run the risk of an incomplete pass. It stops the clock. When you're running the ball, it just keeps that clock going all of the time. Of course, they stop it briefly for a first down and what have you. But that's the general mentality of, playing an under or an over in a football game if they're going to pass the ball or they're going to run the ball. And in this matchup, you have to figure these 2 teams are going to run the ball. Boise State also, I think it's the number 1 team in the country against the pass. Now, that might not help this defense against Air Force, who rarely throws the ball, but just another reason that there's going to be a lot of rushing the football going on. And again, that would lead you and myself to the under.
And to add a little bit more fuel to the fire, both of these teams are top 14 in red zone scoring. 4th in touchdowns allowed for Boise State and 7th in touchdowns allowed for Air Force. So that screams the under in this game. So I really like it at this number. Glad we have some agreement on this one. Let's move to the next game here. I believe we have a massive Pac-12 matchup. We have UCLA. There it is. UCLA versus Oregon. This is like a 6 to 6.5 ish in most of the books. Very high total of 70.5, Brady. Pac-12 country. I'm going to let you start.
Well, you know what? UCLA has scored 40 plus points in all but one game this season. So it makes sense that the total is up that high. I actually bet this game and I played the Oregon Ducks, and I know there's been action both ways. I think wise guys are split on this one, and some are taking the dog with the Bruins and some are playing the Oregon Ducks. I actually went the way of the Ducks, and one of the reasons is they just don't lose at home. It's 22 straight home games that they have won at Autzen Stadium in Eugene. They're the typical Oregon team that can run the ball. And UCLA, we talked about it in the open. They've been such a pleasant surprise. They do everything well. And DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, is having an outstanding season. His touchdown to interception ratio, I believe it's through the last 4 games or so, is 15-2. So he's protecting the football, being very efficient and putting points on the board, and he's doing it with his legs as well. But this is I believe the first road game of the season for UCLA, and what a better introduction to go to Oregon for your first road game. So I think it's a tough test right now for this game for the UCLA Bruins. I also, they've been so. They've really shocked people. They've won outright as underdogs against the Washington Huskies and against the Utah Utes. And I wonder if they're being a little bit inflated here, whereas Oregon is kind of, they suffered that devastating loss. They were just crushed by Georgia early in the year. I do wonder a little bit about the competition that Oregon has faced. They played BYU. They played Arizona. And maybe they haven't faced a team as good as UCLA yet. I don't think they certainly have, but it's Oregon at home and it's UCLA maybe being a little bit inflated off of all the good things that they have done recently. It ought to be a heck of a game, but I kind of expect the Ducks probably to win this one by a touchdown.
You're not the only one on Oregon, and there's some sharp people that I know that are also on Oregon, which pains me to go against it. But I am. But I also think the total can be looked at. I would love to call this the Chip Kelly revenge game, right? Obviously, it's like, why would you have revenge anyway? You're the one that personally left to the NFL and coached the Eagles. It's like, there's no revenge here. But what I do see is that these last 2 games, UCLA covered in 2020 in Oregon. There was a 38-35 total or final score, total of 73. And then you have in 2021 last year in UCLA, Oregon did beat them 34-31. I believe Oregon was a dog and covered that one. So very interesting that these games were played close. But what really worries me is the rain.
Yeah.
I know Oregon's the massive rushing team, and I think they're even like number 1 in rushing success rate, which blows my mind. And a lot of that's Bo Nix just getting out there and knowing when to take off with his legs, a lot of those numbers. But so does Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But this rain says 100% chance of rain. And I checked every single weather site that I do, and I don't see any chance it's not raining, at least not right now, which makes me think that they have to run the ball. I think that, sometimes with good rushing teams, the total is still a little dangerous because they can just score against each other. But in this situation, both these teams are fantastic against the run.
Right.
Oregon only gives up, I believe, about 3 rushing yards per attempt, or 3.6, and UCLA 3.1 per attempt. Now, Oregon has had the harder schedule, so it's probably more of a push. But the fact that these teams are good against the run and they're probably expecting a lot of run, I'm probably going to play this under too. I'm probably going to play under 70.5. So I did play UCLA at the 6.5, but I like the under a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a high number. And, not that rain completely affects, scoring in a football game. You have to check the wind, as you know, Kiev. That's really the factor as far as the elements that will affect a total. It's the wind, not necessarily snow or rain, because the wind will, basically limit how much these guys can pass the football, which will lead to games going over the total. But you're right. Both of these teams rush the football very well, but they also defend the run very well. I think, and I don't necessarily disagree with your UCLA catching 6. I just feel it ought to be a tight game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think Oregon is going to roll them. I certainly don't think UCLA is going to roll the Ducks. But I feel like late in the game, Oregon will eventually pull away with that home field advantage, just wearing down that UCLA defense with the rushing game. Bo Nix has only thrown 1 interception in his last 5 games, and he's got a very good receiving core as well. So I think, again, when we get to the fourth quarter, eventually Oregon will just be a little bit too much for the Bruins. And I think they win this game by 7-8 points.
All right, no, that's that 7's a key number. Yeah, wind about 9.5 miles per hour. Definitely, if they can pass the ball, it's a little bit more in danger. The rushing game is more effective with rain because the running back knows where he's cutting. It's a lot harder to not know where you're cutting for linebackers, and that's just something that's somewhat known in the sports betting industry. But if it's going to be a downpour monsoon, then the passing game is just not going to be there anyway. A little slight rain's not going to hurt it.
Yeah, and under 10 miles an hour of wind is not a big deal. We were talking about golf earlier. I know that professional golfers feel that when the wind reaches 12 miles an hour, that makes them adjust. That's going to affect their golf ball enough where they have to, account for it. And I think it's similar with football. 12 to 15 miles an hour, that's going to affect your passing game. But less than 10 miles an hour, I don't know if it's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Well, that's our thoughts on this. This is one of the bigger games of the weekend, so I was really glad I covered it. But we have to talk about Mississippi State, Alabama here, because Alabama finally has a loss, and we know it doesn't happen often. They're sitting at home. The spread's minus 21. That's a pretty big spread. Just kind of looking at the money here, it looks like, if there's no real sharp impact on here, I do see that like 46% of the money's on Mississippi State, but only 35% of the bets. That's really nothing to shake your head at. There's nothing to go from there, especially when you have virtually no line movement since this thing's been around since like Monday morning, maybe even late Sunday night. So this game is interesting because you're going to hear all the narratives of Bama's going to put the foot down, have revenge, blah blah blah, and that does happen all the time, But for this game, my number is always low on Bama, and I still get beat, and that's seriously, it's like hard to power rank Bama. It's like sometimes you got to think of how many scores more Bama's going to have, how many more touchdowns, rather than just minus 18.5, because my number's minus 18.5. Well, what does that mean? Well, last year, Mississippi State only could kick 3 field goals. They do have a great coach. I have Mississippi State as a good team. They're not a great team. I have Alabama as a great team, and they're in a great spot here afterwards. I'm not touching this game with a 10-foot pole, Brady. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to either. And I don't think we're alone. Like you said, I don't think this game is seeing a whole lot of action, especially from wise guys. The numbers stayed right there. I certainly don't think they want to lay it with Alabama. You might see them get involved before kickoff. And if this gets to 22 or 23, they might take it with Mississippi State. But I don't feel, the numbers probably about where you feel it should be. You mentioned 18.5. You're right in that window there. It is certainly an emotional game, I believe, for Mississippi State. The young man, Sam Westmoreland, passed away, unfortunately, earlier this week. And so Mississippi State comes into Tuscaloosa with heavy hearts. And a lot of times that can be a motivational factor for a team. Will that be enough to carry them, to get inside the 21? I kind of think it's possible to motivate a team, things like that we have, tertiary, things outside of the normal football game that happen. I think it's possible that those type of things can carry a team through a first quarter or a first half, but eventually Alabama is going to be Alabama. The off of a loss thing, I don't buy into too much, and maybe the line's even inflated a little bit because the books know everybody's going to jump on the Crimson Tide. Oh, they're going to rebound and this and that and the other. But like you said, Mississippi State's a pretty good team. I would only be headed towards the dog here just based on the general sentiment that the masses are probably going to want to land on Alabama, the rebound off of the loss type of thing. But, Mississippi State's first of all, they're a ranked team. They're in the top 25, and they're off of a loss to Kentucky as well. They pass the ball very well. They don't have a great defense, pretty average defense, and Alabama does everything well. So Alabama should cruise in this game. I just don't know if it'll be by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's just total agreement here. Too big of a spread. I'm gonna be interested in watching a little bit of it though. It's gonna be fun to watch, just kind of see where the narrative falls.
You always like to watch Mike Leach in the air raid, right?
You do, especially on a defense that had some holes last week in their secondary against Tennessee. Some serious holes. They couldn't. Hendon Hooker was just able to let it ride. Alabama has that pressure defense where they say we're going to get to the quarterback before your receivers get down the field. Well, that didn't happen last week, so that's part of the reason why Tennessee had so much success. And what an amazing game that was. All right, well, that covers 3 big games in college. Time to go to the NFL, and this is one game that you picked, and I'm so glad that you picked this one, Brady, because there's just so many stories developing this week for the Kansas City Chiefs at the San Francisco 49ers, and the Niners 2-point home dog. I'm going to let you have the floor.
Yeah, amazing news on Thursday night, late in the evening, that Christian McCaffrey gets dealt to San Francisco. Certainly they unloaded some draft capital for him, but it kind of shows that the Niners are just all in and they're going for this thing. And I really think they have a good chance. I actually made an exact Super Bowl bet before the season started. Rather than just betting one team to win the conference, I chose the Baltimore Ravens and the 49ers to be the Super Bowl matchup and got that at 80-1, which was better than even parlaying the 2, conference champions or whatever. And I think I still have a decent shot. The Ravens are about 20-1 to go to the Super Bowl. San Francisco now in the neighborhood of 14 to 16-1 to go to the Super Bowl after the McCaffrey trade. I think you could argue San Francisco is the best team in the NFC. Now, we know what the Eagles have done, and they look fantastic, but we have also seen what the Niners have done in the playoffs last year, beating the Dallas Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers. I think their defense is absolutely phenomenal. That's maybe my favorite thing to watch about the 49ers. And I grew up a 49er fan. But I grew up in the Bay Area, but this defense is maybe my favorite thing to watch on this team this year. They're absolutely stacked. And D'Amico Ryans, the defensive coordinator, how has he filled in for Robert Saleh? I mean, my goodness, I think they're maybe better than Saleh's defense that went to the Super Bowl against these Kansas City Chiefs in 2019. And the big story for the 49ers, not only obviously the McCaffrey deal, but the big story last week has been the injuries. They were really without any star players on defense last week at Atlanta. And now it looks like they're going to get just about everybody back. Eric Armstead along that defensive line may be the only piece that they don't get back this week, but it looks like Joey Bosa, Jason Verrett, who is an all-pro cornerback, tore his ACL last season. It looks like he'll make his debut. Jimmy Ward, I believe, is going to play with like a club glove type of deal over his broken hand. He should be back in the lineup. And then you also, on the offensive side, you have Trent Williams, the all-pro offensive lineman who had a high ankle sprain. He's expected to come back this week as well. So it looks like the Niners are going to be nearly fully healthy. Kansas City does have some injury problems as well. My numbers in this game, my initial set of numbers came to San Francisco -5. And then my other sets of numbers came to San Francisco like -2 and -2.5. All three sets of numbers that I run came to San Francisco as the favorite. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they won this game outright. You also look what the Chiefs have been through lately. They go on the road and they lose to the Colts. Then they have a very tough game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday Night Football. Now, they cruised pretty handily in that game, but again, on the road, national spotlight. Then they play a division rival in the Las Vegas Raiders. That one goes down to the wire. Then they play the Buffalo Bills. Now they got to travel to play the 49ers. It's been a tough road to hoe for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I mentioned that 2019 Super Bowl, a little bit of revenge here for the 49ers. A lot of the same players on this team in 2022 were on that Super Bowl club. And I think this time around, they probably want to finish the job. I do definitely lean San Francisco. I took them early in the week plus the 3, and I really don't mind 2 or 2.5. I think San Francisco as a dog is the play.
Wow, that's great analysis. And thank you for some of those updates. I thought the Trent Williams is so important. I didn't even really even notice him not on the injury report when I was looking this morning. My pure numbers are San Fran -2, right?
Okay.
And so it favors San Fran just from the algorithm. And that's what I'm leaning towards more now that we have the data points. So I'm starting to use power ratings a heck of a lot less. Is Chartavius Ward and Jimmy Ward going to be playing this game?
Jimmy, I believe, is going to go. Like I mentioned, I think he's going to have like a club, wrapped around his hand. He has been practicing with that all week. Charvarius Ward has, I don't believe, practiced yet this week. We'll see if he shows up on Friday or on Saturday. And he's a big, important piece. He's been, that has been really the weakness, even going back to that 2019 Super Bowl, and it has been for a few years. The weakness in the 49er defense has been the secondary, but not so much this year. Their secondary is really strong, and Charvarius Ward is a big reason why. So if he's not able to go, he will be missed. But, that's last week they had cluster injuries. Kiev, we like to talk about that in the sports betting space.
Yeah.
Cluster injuries can really affect a team, not necessarily just one guy here or there. But last week the Niners had cluster injuries. This week I don't think they do.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's getting better and better. You see here on the injury report, and I'm just pulling up ESPN's here. So Emmanuel Mosley, I was looking at, he's out. But
yeah, he's out for the year, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's out for the year. But if they can get some of that depth back, I think is really big. And I also kind of thought that when Atlanta beat them, they did dink and dunk a lot. I thought it was like a dinking and dunking game, and misdirection, and there's some luck involved. There's some great plays by some of the big, tall receivers. So, my numbers line up with what you said. I didn't bet it. I'm not sure if I will get to the window on that, but it's a great analysis, and you definitely taught me something on this one. So I really appreciate it, man. And I know CMC is not going to be a big impact this week. Everyone, the line did move a little bit, like a half point or so, from 2.5 to 2 when he was traded. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I know that adding depth to that 49ers backfield is huge for their chances of getting to the Super Bowl. So I definitely like it.
Yeah, they're talking about him having a good chance to actually play on Sunday. And I wasn't sure about that. A lot of times you see these trades happen and the guy doesn't play until the following week, or maybe even 2 weeks later. He's got to learn the playbook and all that type of thing. But it's interesting. McCaffrey is so familiar with the regime in San Francisco. Of course, he went to Stanford, and John Lynch, the general manager, is also a Stanford Cardinal. And then you have Kyle Shanahan. Ed McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's father, played for Mike Shanahan with the Denver Broncos. McCaffrey was also on the 1994 Niner team, the last team that won a Super Bowl. And I even read, looking through the clippings with this trade, that Kyle Shanahan, he and his sister, I believe both, at one point babysitted Christian McCaffrey when Ed was playing for Mike Shanahan in Denver. So, I mean, there's so much connection here going on. And I don't know if that, translates into McCaffrey being familiar with the playbook, but I also, at the same time, I think he probably has a pretty darn good idea of what's going on. And they're talking about him possibly being available for, some certain situations in this ball game.
Yeah, I think they'll have a few packages for him this game. Nothing major, maybe a goal line package or something. But RIP to my Wilson in my fantasy football league right now, because you know that he's going to be taking a backseat pretty soon.
You know how it is with San Francisco, though, Kiev. It's really running back by committee. And I think they know that Jeff Wilson is very good. He had a very costly fumble last week, but for the fantasy aspect, I wouldn't throw Jeff Wilson out the window just yet. And I think that's another beautiful thing about this trade for McCaffrey. He's not going to be the feature back that runs the ball 30 times a game. It's going to maybe be 12 times or maybe 15 max. And he's also going to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. So again, I think Wilson is still going to be involved, and good for McCaffrey and his injury history that he probably won't be leaned on as much.
That's very true. You don't want him injured. I hate seeing McCaffrey injured. He's just a tough player, a good kid. Always tries his best and gives it his all. So 100% agree with that. Let's move on to the next game. Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Miami Dolphins. This is the Sunday night game, I believe. Dolphins are favored by 7 points. It's kind of moving up a little bit. Total of this game, just let me bring it up, 45. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. I did bet this immediately at 6, and I saw it and I knew Tua was coming back, and I was like, you serious? And really happy I got a great number. So it goes to the fact where I get do I buy back or not? Well, it's got to hit my number to buy back, and my number's closer to 9.5 here. So I doubt that I'm even going to get there on the buyback. Just kind of hope for my line value here, and hope it doesn't have to throw that line value to the burning pile of great line value dying. Right? But I mean, Pittsburgh is in a terrible spot. They had a massive win last week. Their quarterback Pickett's probably coming back and playing. Mitch finished the game out, so I wonder how that affects them psychologically as well. I believe Minkah Fitzpatrick is back for them, which is good, but I've seen them play with Minkah, and it's been really bad. The Steelers are one of my worst teams in my rankings. I believe I even have them, and I'll pull them up right now. Number 30th. I have them 30th. Which is pretty bad, the fourth worst team here. So just looking at the Miami, I think they're just a much better team with Tua. And you saw some skill last week, at least, when Skylar Thompson starts, and then he goes out. Teddy Bridgewater was able to do a little bit. They actually played the Vikings very well. The Vikings are one of the better teams in the NFL. You have to remember of some of the things that Tua has accomplished with a lot of that talent, with guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle coming back in that Baltimore game. It's Tua's been fantastic, and I think that now that Tua back, it's really going to hype this team up. Even with Pittsburgh getting a little healthier, I think this is a walk-away game for the Dolphins. I would lay it at 7. Not as much as I did at 6, but that's where I go with this game. Any thoughts?
No, I agree with you, Kiev. If you look at the numbers, I mean, my numbers come out really weird. I've got this game as low as a pick 'em. Even the Steelers is like a 1-point favorite, but I think so much of that is based on the numbers that have been populated since Tua's been out of the lineup. But you make the point. This team was absolutely 100% different. They're 3-0 with Tua, 0-3 without him, right? And I really liked what this team was doing early in the season. Mike McCarthy, of course, coming over from San Francisco, that boy genius that designs this stuff. And what I saw in the first couple weeks was just a match made in heaven with Tua's game and McDaniel's play calling. I may have called him McCarthy. I apologize. Mike McDaniel, his play calling, not that guy in Dallas. But I thought that was a match made in heaven. McDaniel's play calling with Tua's abilities and his strengths. His strength, of course, is accuracy and timing and quickness, and the slant routes that they were running and the misdirection that they were doing with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. In the honeymoon period of McDaniel and Tua, the first couple 3 games of the season, I thought it was really impressive to watch. And for the Dolphins' sake, hopefully they get back to that this week now that Tua's back in the lineup. And you're right. I mean, the letdown spot for Pittsburgh is really enormous. It was a massive win last week. I didn't necessarily expect them to win the game, but them competing in that game did not surprise me off of that embarrassing defeat at the hands of the Buffalo Bills. And, having lost, I think it was 4 in a row since their opening game, and Mike Tomlin in the role of a double-digit dog and all that, you could expect that they were going to come with some effort. And I also think it speaks to Tampa Bay. Yeah, this team they're not firing on all cylinders at all, namely their quarterback, who's got so many different things going on in his life right now. But now you've got a whole different situation, a team that returns their quarterback, doesn't have those distractions. This team's looking to get back on track again. And like you say, Pittsburgh's still Pittsburgh, one of the worst teams in the league. So I would agree with you. If it gets to 8 or so, that's I don't know. They might win by double digits, but I would probably only play it at 7 or less.
Yeah, try to definitely shop for a 7. There's some 7s out there. I would even lay -115 if that was the case. It just wouldn't be as big of a play for me. It's kind of how it goes down with my percentage to win and how many units I bet using the Kelly criterion. So very important.
Kiev, what's interesting, to the point that both you and I are making, the difference between Tua and no Tua, the Dolphins were converting on third down about 47% of the time with Tua. That would have ranked 4th in the league. Without him, they've converted less than 30% of the time. That would rank 30th in the league. So massive difference there as far as converting on third down. And that goes a long way into winning football games.
It is massive. And I love the coach there. Being a Kyle Shanahan guy, Mike McDaniel, I think that he's going to be fantastic as a coach in Miami. And I think this is just kind of the beginning for them. So I was wrong kind of coming in the season. I was a little bit lower on them, but I quickly adjusted seeing the amount of skill and how they can impact games and how big of a spot this is for them as well. Now let's go to the greatest game of the weekend, the Bears versus the Patriots, right, Brady?
Wow. Boy, I tell you, they saved this one for Monday night, huh? They saved the best for last.
I mean, they go from Thursday night football to Monday night football. How you love that, man?
Boy, I tell you, I mean, were the points scored in this Thursday night game more than all of the Thursday nights previous, maybe except for the Bills and the Rams to open the season? I bet you it's close. Finally, Arizona and New Orleans putting some points on the board in a Thursday night, but this ought to be a one-way show here and all New England. I think the Bears, you mentioned the Steelers being one of the worst teams in the NFL. I would say the Bears are probably worse. It's interesting. We saw what Bill Belichick did last week to Cleveland. He found what their biggest weapon was, and he shut it down. And that was Nick Chubb and the rushing attack for the Cleveland Browns. The Bears don't have much of anything except for a rushing attack. They're not especially good on defense. They have nothing in the way of a passing game. I mean, all they can really do at all is run the football. So Belichick doesn't have to figure out what he's got to stop this week. There's really only one thing to counter, I would believe, in the game plan. And, it's interesting, too. Chicago is not good against the run. And, of course, New England is very good in rushing the football. And they've been leaning on that heavily. Now, I know Bailey Zappi threw for over 300 yards last week, and that was more Belichick genius as well. Everybody figured they'd, take it easy on the kid and just rush the football. They turned him loose, and they went with the passing game. And, of course, he passed with flying colors. But I think you can just pick your poison. You can probably do anything you want against this Bears team, and it's up to 8 now, and I'd probably lay it. I think it's a great teaser number to tease down to -2. But I think we get a one-way street here that is all New England on Monday night.
Well, I'll tell you, my numbers say New England just based upon everything. Like it's exactly at 8. So the problem I have is I don't know if Mac Jones is playing. I'm guessing he should. I think he shouldn't play. I mean, why would you stop what Bailey Zappi's doing until he loses? I think we've all seen that before with Tom Brady and
Yeah.
Back in the day, right? Back in 2002. But it doesn't mean Mac Jones is losing his job. It's just say, I want you 100% healthy, no clicks in your ankle, blah, 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 and Zappi's winning. But it might bring some unsurety to insecurity even to some of the team here. They might not know what's going on, or they might not. I wonder how they answer that. It's hard to go against a guy that's winning and go back to the other guy. It always is. But the Bears have 11 days of rest, coming into this too. And we have to remember that they outgained the Washington Commanders by 170 some yards. I mean, a massive amount. They just couldn't score when they got to the 1-yard line. It was weird. The Bears should have won this game by 14 to 20 points, and so their red zone efficiency is terrible. But what have they done in this 11 days to fix it? I don't know. Justin Fields can get down the field. He can get down the field. The back door could be open here, and that's my problem. I lean the Bears at even though my numbers say 8, but I'm not playing this. And I think that the Patriots are probably a very good teaser leg, Brady.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to play the game either. My numbers came out to Patriots -9.5, Patriots -6.5, and Patriots -4.5. So a little bit all over the map there. Nothing really stood out crystal clear to me. But like I said previously, the Patriots should have their way with Chicago. But you make a good point that the Bears have extra rest, and certainly Fields is a weapon as far as his legs. You talked about their inefficiency in the red zone. Justin Fields is the lowest rated quarterback in the NFL in the red zone, just 4 of 11 passing with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. So they're just.
Man. I'm a Bears fan.
I'm sorry about that. But they are just absolutely awful in the red zone. And you're right. I mean, there's probably some room for a backdoor cover here, but if the Patriots execute the way that they should, the way that they have the last couple of weeks, it should be all in their favor. But no, I'm not going to go to the window and hope that that's going to happen. It's really difficult for me to back the Bears. I did back them earlier this year against the Minnesota Vikings in a division game against a poor rush defense in Minnesota. I thought that made some sense there, but I don't want any part of them here.
The Bears. We don't want to be part of the Bears this week. I don't disagree, but wouldn't it be just something if this is the game? They're like, we have nothing to lose. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. You never know what's going to happen, obviously, especially this year in the NFL where everybody's so close together, minus Buffalo.
Yeah, the other thing is you talk about Chicago possibly pulling off the miracle. You've got a rookie head coach, and a lot of people have heard the storyline of Bill Belichick against rookie quarterbacks. He's also very dominant over rookie head coaches. So another disadvantage there possibly for Chicago.
Well, I'll give you one more. Allen's going to be officiating. He's 64-54 for the home team. So we can keep digging deeper.
Isn't that true, Kiev? Don't we have to start handicapping officials these days now as well? Because I mean, the way the game has gone, these roughing the passer penalties and the the way that they protect the offensive skill position, and then you have coaches' challenges and replays. It just interrupts the flow of the game so much. I think it is starting to become a thing where you really have to look at the crew and what their tendencies are. Do they call a lot of flags? Do they let the players play? Unfortunately, more work for us, my friend.
Yeah, Boger calls a lot of PI. I think he did last night, and
Right.
that went over. And you'll notice that in a lot of his games. Same with Torbert, and I already do that, man. I've been doing that for 2 years. I handicap the officials. I have
You're
database.
ahead of the game. It's become a thing. I was just talking about it on VSiN last week. I'm like, man, I think we have to start looking at some of these officiating crews' tendencies, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, good stuff here. It looks like we're playing the Dolphins at the 7. You like your Niners, and you said you're okay with it at 2. We have a disagreement on UCLA versus Oregon, but both are kind of looking at the under a little bit. Nothing on Alabama, and the under with Boise State versus Air Force under 47.5. That brings us to our most likely dog to win outright. And it's got to be like a 3.5 point spread or about plus 150 is what we usually say. We're not going to give anyone that's like a +2 or +1 or anything silly like that. This has got to be a little bit of fun. That's not, doesn't mean we're giving this out as a play or anything for our own people or whatever we like to do. But I usually bet this. I bet it every week whenever I give it out. And we've been pretty successful here at Better Odds Sports betting at it. So I'll let you start, Brady. Who do you have for your most likely dog to win outright?
Well, I like San Francisco, but that doesn't quite qualify. They're probably my plus 120 or so on the money line. We're looking for a little juicier one than that. Um, I tell you what, watch out for the Detroit Lions against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I think, we're talking about the Patriots game. The way this game should play out, the Patriots should steamroll the Bears, and the same thing is true with Dallas and the Lions. But the Lions are coming off of a bye week, and they have lost 3 games in a row heading into that bye week. And, I think this is a little bit of a handicapping 101 thing for me in the NFL season. I like to bet on teams that go into their bye week struggling. On the other side of their bye week, I like to bet on them, and that would be the Detroit Lions coming into this game certainly struggling. And so I'm not going to make that my pick. I would find it a little bit shocking if they beat the Dallas Cowboys outright, but I think they can make some noise in that game. But the one I'm going to go with, Kiev, and this is almost 2-1 on the money line, is the Seattle Seahawks going down to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. We've seen this line come down. I think the Chargers opened as high as 6 or 6.5 point favorites, all the way down to 5 now, still 5.5 in some spots you can get with the underdog Seahawks here. The defense is really a weak spot, and that's an understatement for Seattle. And the Chargers may be able to exploit that. But I just don't know if the Chargers are that great. I was betting against them on Monday night with the Denver Broncos, and that was a heck of a sweat, but we got home.
Same here.
There you go. Justin Herbert, of course, struggled in that game in the red zone, and Denver, one of the very best teams, the very best team, I believe, in red zone defense in the NFL. So a different animal here is this defense for the Seattle Seahawks, but a different animal offensively as well. I think they can make a good run at staying inside this number. And Kiev, when teams in the NFL cover the spread, they usually win. So that would be my choice right there.
Yeah, no disagreement. I'm on Seattle. I was on them since they were a 7, and obviously they're shot down to 5 now. So it looks like the sharp movement was definitely on Seattle here, and I don't disagree at all. I thought that was a little bit of a fraudulent win, actually, at home against Denver. And if you look at it, Seattle is putting up the points. They're kind of playing on that whole Jets-like momentum, like the Jets have. Like, we're winning, we're doing well. You love teams like that. They eventually crap out somewhere, but you want them definitely riding them while they're high. So I love the play. And yeah, the Lions, it looks like that line's moving down a little bit towards you. It looks like Swift might play. A couple of their offensive line comes back. The whole other side of the coin is Dak Prescott's coming back for Dallas. So that's the big thought on that one. But I don't think I think that's great value on these. And I love it. Plus 200 is a fantastic play on Seattle. I'm going to go back to college, and I'm going to go with East Carolina. They are playing UCF, and UCF. They've been on a roll lately. But let's just take a look at some of their competition here. They beat South Carolina State 56-10. Then they lose to Louisville. Louisville's just a little bit above average team to me. Malik Willis, and pretty much everybody. Then they beat a really bad Florida Atlantic team. They beat a Georgia Tech team that if you watched that game last night, you wonder how the heck they even have a victory, much less even being in that game. And Virginia's a bad team too, so that was really interesting. Then they beat SMU at home. That was kind of like that after hurricane type game, and SMU has improved to be all that great. But yeah, I give them some props for that. But then the Temple win 70-13. Now they're going to East Carolina here. East Carolina's a pretty good team. Kept it really close with NC State that first game. They beat Old Dominion by a good amount instead of like Virginia, where they beat by 2 points. They had a hiccup against Navy against the run, but then they come back and beat South Florida very well. Lost at Tulane, second road game in a row. We know how good Tulane is. Heck, they're ranked number 25, which is amazing. And then they had a tough game against Memphis, and they covered that. It took them a while. It ended up going to overtime. But here's UCF here, being a bunch of nobodies over a 3-point spread on the road. And UCF guess who on deck? Cincinnati. There's Cincinnati on deck. It is a massive look-ahead spot for them. This is a big get-right spot for East Carolina. I think it's at plus 170, plus 175. I like East Carolina to win outright.
I think you make a really good case there. And you're right. East Carolina has been a scrappy team. I've actually bet on them a couple of times this season already. I think I won one and lost one. And that's kind of the way they've been, up and down. But I agree. Why is Central Florida laying points on the road? And certainly a look ahead spot there with Cincinnati on deck. So makes sense to me, my friend.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, Seattle and East Carolina are our plays. Where could our viewers and listeners get your great information and media, Brady?
Well, of course, with the VSiN network, VSiN.com. As far as the shows I do a golf betting podcast that comes out on Tuesday afternoons. And then I do the Pro Football Blitz, an all NFL show with a former NFL player and great friend, Mike Pritchard. We do that on Saturdays and Sundays in the afternoon. Saturday is an all preview show, and then Sunday is a live betting show during Sunday Night Football, and also recapping all the games and looking ahead to the next week. One other show that's really cool, Kiev, I don't know if you have tuned in yet, but at 5 o'clock Pacific time on Saturdays, we do the football contest show, and we reveal the consensus 5 picks for the Circa Millions and the Circa Survivor contest. Derek Stevens and Mike Palm, all those guys are on the program with us, and we talk football contests in Las Vegas for an hour. It's a pretty cool show.
Oh, it's a very cool show. And yes, I know of it. My only unfortunate is that with kids and everything, that's their dinner time. So I try to go back and forth and pick my media as best as I can to absorb, to get my information. Brady, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, obviously, you can check us out at theoddsbreakers.com. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet us at theoddsbreakers. Tweet Brady at Las Vegas Golfer. Everybody, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the big games, and go get some winners.
Thank you for watching Better Odds Sports Betting.